This is the School Success Podcast, a podcast for school leaders to learn from other school leaders what's working and what's not, and to get inspiration and encouragement, as well as strategies to grow school enrollment, connect with families, retain teachers, recruit teachers, and everything in between. You guys are heroes, and I cannot thank you enough for pouring into this next generation that's coming behind us. My goal is you will take at least one thing away from every episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. Please enjoy the School Success Podcast. Hey, school success makers. Today we're joined by my friend Michael out of beautiful Virginia Beach, Virginia, and we dive into some awesome things around fundraising, as well as some additional revenue stream ideas that you can use for your school to help bring in more money if that's something you're looking to do. We dive into all of that and more, and as always, we have a blast doing it, so stay tuned for the next episode of the School Success Podcast. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the School Success Podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Slater. I'm joined by a new friend, Michael, who is the head of school at Virginia Beach Friends School in Virginia Beach, Virginia, everybody. Beautiful town. I was actually just there, randomly visiting a friend just last week. Beautiful place, and he is doing amazing things at this school. We got connected through LinkedIn, and I was like, I have to have this guy on the podcast. I got to hear about the Friends School, what their philosophy is, all the things that they're doing. So I got my wish. He's on this podcast, and I don't want to take any thunder away from him. But Michael, welcome to the podcast, sir.
Mitchell, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure and honor. Thanks so much for what you're doing, not just for me, but for all the other educators out there. You know, being able to learn from other educators and what's working for them and what's not working is really invaluable. So we really appreciate you taking the time to put this together. So great job.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate that. I know we got connected through LinkedIn mainly because of the Montessori connection. I know our son, we're raising him in the Montessori style, and I know you have a huge background in Montessori, raised your kids in Montessori, but you're in this school that's a friend's school, and it's so crazy to me that there's all these different styles of schools that some I have never heard of before, but they're very prominent and very popular. And so when I was hearing about your story, I was like, okay, I want to hear about this one because we haven't had anybody on yet to talk about it. So I guess before we dive into your school, because I don't want to get derailed too much, I love hearing about, the guests a little bit. So if you want to give me a little bit of your background, family, what you like to do for fun, and then we'll kind of dive into the school.
Absolutely. So I am a lifelong educator, grew up in Pennsylvania in the Poconos, was a public school kid who didn't know much about private schools. So it's other than watching Dead Poet Society and when I saw Robin Williams, knowing that that's the kind of teacher that I could see myself being one day. Went to Muhlenberg College in Allentown, PA, and after Muhlenberg, found myself lucky enough to land a job at Georgetown Prep, which is a Catholic independent school, all-boys school in Bethesda, Maryland. Worked as a prefect, which is an RA for the boarders there, for 5 years. It was my night and weekend job, and it actually laid the foundation for me wanting to be in education. There was a gentleman named Jim Powers who was the head of school then, and Jim is pretty much a legendary figure in independent schools. And from that experience, myself and my 12 other friends who did it, there's about 5 or 6 of us who are now heads of school. Fortunately for me, I met my wife when I was in D.C. We were married in 1999, and from there, her job took us to New York City, where I got to work at NYU in their admissions office for a year and saw competitive college admissions. And then her job then took us to San Francisco, where I found myself as the founding admissions director at Stewart Hall High School. Fabulous all-boys Catholic independent school, part of the Schools of the Sacred Heart. And actually, 22 years later, just won their first state title in their division for California basketball 2 weekends ago. Wow. My daughter, Chase, was born in 2004. My wife and I decided, we can't afford anything on the California coast in San Francisco, and all our family were back on the East Coast, so we moved back to the East Coast. And there I found myself getting a job at Moses Brown School. And Moses Brown School is a very old established Quaker independent school in Providence, Rhode Island, and I was the dean of students there. And at that time, I didn't know anything about Quaker education. And Quaker education is grounded on the Friends' testimonies of spices: simplicity, peace, integrity, community, equality, and stewardship. So I was the dean of students there for 6 years, and we had our second child, Greer, in 2006. And after 6 years of being the dean of discipline, essentially, there was a little Montessori school in Narragansett, Rhode Island I had never heard of named Quest Montessori, and they'd only been around 10 years, but they were struggling with some enrollment issues. And it seemed like it was a really interesting opportunity that reflected some of the experiences that I had building schools from San Francisco. My wife and I went to take a tour of the school, partly looking at opportunities for me, but also for our kids, and absolutely fell in love with Montessori education. We are two people who drank the Montessori Kool-Aid by the bucket. And, I ultimately found myself not knowing much about Montessori other than what I read during my master's program and the little chapter about alternative educations while I was doing my master's at American. But a wonderful gentleman named Paul Raymond, who was the head of school, said, Mike, come down here. I need an assistant head of school, and you can do all the marketing, admissions, enrollment, and everything I can because I'm a one-man show, and I'll teach you everything you need to know about Montessori. And Paul was my mentor for 3 years as the assistant head of school. And fortunately, we were able, and Paul was able to secure funding through a rural development, USDA rural development loan that we were able to then build a brand new building in Narragansett, Rhode Island. And we tripled enrollment over a 3-year period, going from 40 to 80 to 120 kids. And Quest went from being like a mom and pop Montessori school to a really well-established independent school. After 3 years, Paul left. I became the head of school for 4 years, and we became the first and only accredited Montessori program in Rhode Island in southern New England. We were both accredited by American Montessori Society and ASING, which is the Association of Independent Schools in New England. And then after doing that for 7 years, my wife and I decided New England's awesome and Rhode Island's beautiful in the summer, but we were ready for warmer weather and we wanted to stay in the beach. But we found this little, great, Quaker independent school that was much like Moses Brown, but on a smaller scale and kind of dealing with some of the issues that Quest was dealing with from enrollment, called Virginia Beach Friends School. And now here I am in my 4th year. Beyond, the benefits of living at the beach and surfing and things like that in the winter, I just got done doing some snowboarding with my son and my daughter and my wife over the past winter. Those are the big passions. If we're not, snowboarding in the winter, we're, hanging out at the beach and just enjoying everything that Hampton Roads has to offer.
Well, I love that. I miss from Alaska. I moved here 4 years ago, or to Florida 4 years ago, and I love snowboarding, snow machining, anything snow related. I love it, but I haven't done it now for a while. So just recently got into surfing, and I've really enjoyed surfing. It's not the best surfing here on the east coast of Florida, but it works for me. I can
Absolutely.
ride a wave in, and it's fun. So
well, and you're already better than me. I've been trying to surf for the last 10 years, and I still, my kids who started when they were little. Surfing is one of those things where, unless you're born Kelly Slater, it's a now 50-year-old guy who's been doing it for 10 years. I'm a hot mess out there, but it's fun being in the water nonetheless with my kids. So.
I agree, and it's funny. Even having the last name Slater, like Kelly Slater, I still nobody ever be like, "Are you related to Kelly Slater?" I've actually never had that before, but. I definitely am not related to him because I don't have surfing skills like he does. But surfing is so fun.
You need to play that up though, especially if you're in Cocoa Beach. Like you could definitely get a free dinner at some restaurant if you just say you're related to him. I'm sure. So
maybe I should capitalize on that a little bit because I'm only an hour and a half ish from Cocoa Beach. Just go up there and be like, "Hey
absolutely, man."
Show my driver's license as proof and everything. That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, I love that you have an awesome story. Obviously, you've been all around. You're obviously, like you mentioned already, a lifelong educator, and I love that you've experienced different styles of education. So before we dive into your school specifically in Virginia Beach, let's talk about the Quaker education and what exactly how does that differ from just a traditional public school, private school, as well as how does it differ from Montessori, since I know they are similar?
Yeah.
I'd love you to just explain that.
Yeah. So, being, I started as a public school English teacher, and I was working at a private school, but living there at Georgetown Prep. But I also taught 10th, 11th grade English at a school called Montgomery Blair High School. Working at a Quaker school. Quaker schools are a faith-based school, and Quaker schools have been around forever. Particularly if you get up to the Pennsylvania area, the Mid-Atlantic states, because of William Penn and that root system that is there. There's Quaker schools all over the place, and they've been there for a really long time. There's Penn Charter School. There's, you name it. There's Quaker schools everywhere. Swarthmore is a Quaker college, has Quaker roots. Ultimately, what all Quaker schools are, in the most famous Quaker school is Sidwell Friends in Washington, D.C., where President Obama's children went, President Clinton's daughter went. I believe the a number of the president's kids went there. Ultimately, if you walked into the halls of Sidwell Friends, you would see the same testimonies that you see here at Virginia Beach Friends School of spices. That simplicity, peace, integrity, community, equality, and stewardship. And those words are the umbrella that sits over every Quaker school. And Quakers believe that God is within everybody, and they describe that as a light inside you. And ultimately, Quakers, they worship in silence, and the idea that if you speak out of that silence, it's God speaking through you. We don't proselytize. We don't talk about God in the sense of, we talk about that light inside you, and encouraging kids through our curriculum to understand what equality is, what integrity is, what community is, what stewardship is, what simplicity means, and how do we integrate that into the classroom. And at the end of the day, when parents come on campus and they don't know anything about Quaker education, and we start talking about the testimonies, they always say, well, that's how we're raising our children. We're raising our children to be good human beings, and that's at the heart of what Quaker schools do. Now, philosophically, what does that mean in the classroom? That means that it's really about meeting kids where they're at, much like Montessori. It's about teachers being more guides than follow me, I'm the teacher, but following the child. It means fostering that sense of independence and curiosity. It means hands-on experiential learning. So the nice thing about working in a Quaker environment, you have the opportunity to pull from a lot of different philosophies. You're not beholden. Like when I was head of Montessori school, we were a Montessori school, and that's what we did. We had a 3-hour work cycle in the morning. We had all the Montessori materials. Our teachers were Montessori trained. You couldn't really pull in Reggio Emilia philosophy. You couldn't pull in Waldorf philosophy. And those are really great philosophies. And the great thing about Montessori is that's what parents are there for. And for my kids and for your kids, it worked out beautifully for who they are as people when they were younger. When we made the transition to Friends School, my son did middle school here, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and my daughter did 8th grade. And it was a really great transition for us because they were allowed to still have some of those Montessori philosophies, but their programming, particularly in middle school, and this is where Montessori kind of has some challenges. When you make that transition into middle school, when you want to start testing kids a little bit more and getting them ready for that transition into high school, it was really great for the kids to have a Quaker experience because it went from more working with the materials to kind of getting more into that nitty gritty of getting ready for that high school experience that, now we will be assessing, and now the homework is ramped up and you're more taking home versus doing it in school like you would do in a Montessori school. But, that's really the similarity, between Quaker education and Montessori, and even a public school. Public teachers talk about Socratic seminar, and really, I think more public schools are trying to get to be having those Montessori tendencies, and there's actually some public Montessori schools, but really empowering kids to be learners and independent learners and loving learning for learning's sake versus just having to take a test. And I think, between Montessori schools do that really well and Quaker schools do that really well also.
Are there public Friends schools out there?
No, that's one thing you won't really find. It's because of the faith-based aspect for it. But you will find Quaker schools all over the country. There's a Friends school in San Francisco. There's Friends schools all up and down the East Coast. There's Friends schools in the Midwest and in Minnesota. We're part of an accrediting body called Friends Council on Education. And anybody who wants to learn more about Friends schools, you can go to their website and just Google Friends Council on Education. They're based out of Philadelphia. They're a fabulous organization just to learn more about what Quaker education is about. And they do a great job supporting not just small schools like Virginia Beach Friends schools, but those larger schools like Penn Charter or William Penn Charter or Sidwell Friends or even Moses Brown. They kind of tackle all the issues between big and small schools.
And when you mentioned being a faith-based school, I know you said talking about the light inside you. Is that kind of as far as it goes when it comes to faith, or like it's not like here's the Bible, we're going to read a Bible verse today type of thing?
No, absolutely not. Yeah, we don't talk anything. We don't have anything regarding the Bible in class. There's nothing. My son goes to a school called Norfolk Christian, and he has that a part of his curriculum. And that's very much a faith-based school, but based in Christianity. My daughter goes to an independent school called Norfolk Collegiate, and they don't talk about that. They don't have any of that faith-based component. Friends School, our unique selling proposition is our values-based education, but it's that values-based in the testimonies, which are very light on the Christianity piece, but more about helping kids to be good, human beings at the end of the day.
And when you say faith-based, kind of like the basis of how the school started is from biblical principles that were learned, kind of thing.
Yeah, so Quakers have been around for a really long time, and and that religious philosophy of the light inside you and being moved to speak through God, and like every vessel, every person can speak God's word, wasn't really frowned upon historically, and that's why Quakers were continually persecuted. So it's one of those things where Quakers really want people to find the religion on their own, because it's about the connectivity of you and that individual relationship with God. And we don't talk about that with the kids at all. As far as, we might have for the little kids, when we do what's called meeting for worship once a week. And in meeting for worship, there's typically a query question that's based on one of the testimonies. So, for example, how have you seen integrity in action here at Friends School this past week? Have you seen any of your friends doing good deeds? And then we'll have silence for all the kids. And during that silence, if anybody's moved to speak, then they'll get up and come to the Zoom camera, or if we're in person, they'll stand up and say, I saw this. And that's that idea of being, that inner light moving you to speak. And we kind of joke in meeting for worship, it's like either get up or throw up. You get this sense in your stomach of like, I want to say something, and you feel like, compelled to stand up. And 9 times out of 10, the littlest people say the most profound things. And, you're always kind of blown away by it. And then at the end of that, we'll have what's called joys and concerns. And, kids will talk about their joys as far as it's my birthday this weekend, or, my grandparents are coming, or concern. Or, a lot of times it's about my dog. My dog's sick and not feeling well. But, you get kids anywhere from kindergarten all the way up to 8th grade sharing their joys and concerns.
That's cool. No, it's good. And maybe when you said the thing about leaving it to silence and let them speak, I know, like, because I was raised in church my whole life and was a youth pastor for 7 years in Alaska. And it's like the whole thing of like I remember being raised in church where they'd ask a question, and there'd be times it was like, I'm not saying anything. Like I knew for sure I wasn't saying anything, but then there's other times you just feel like your heart's hurting and you're like, I gotta say something. Like I need to say something. So I totally get that feeling, what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with your school, I would love to talk about, we'll start with the boring part first, which is challenges. I'd love to hear, some of these challenges that you guys as a school specifically are facing, and then kind of what you guys are doing to combat those challenges currently.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest challenge, and I'm sure this was probably echoed by some of the other people that you've interviewed, is for little schools, it's sustainability. It's the biggest issue I think, small schools face, is how do you maintain sustainability, particularly in the world that we live in right now. You have some of these long-established independent schools that have endowments and they have financial backing, that when there's a downturn in the economy and there's a downturn in enrollment, they can weather the storm. But when you're a small Quaker school or you're a small Montessori school, trying to figure out the most, sustainable path is really tricky, and it's been really tricky. And I think, for us, that first starts with fundraising and creating a culture of giving that a lot of times at small schools is really hard, because, depending on where your price point is from a tuition perspective, a lot of times the parents are at small schools, their gift to the school is the tuition. And, giving beyond that is really hard, because, it's sometimes a stretch to have their kids at a school like Virginia Beach Friends School, because, where our tuition is, we really serve a wide swath socioeconomically, which is amazing, because that's what we want to do. But, at some of those schools that have a higher end tuition, those families can also afford to give more too. And I think, that's been one of the biggest challenges here, is sustainability and figuring out that path to sustainability. I think the second piece is for, challenges is that the health and well-being of your faculty. And I think this is, everybody has struggled through this, not just, schools, but organizations, particularly in the middle of a pandemic, making sure and taking care of your teachers and their mental mindset and all the things that they've had to struggle with over the last 2 years. From, last year it was teaching in classes with chairs 6 feet apart and cubicles with plastic and masks and that constant, worry of your health. And to this year, transitioning out of that, and then just that balance of like this isn't how, some teachers feeling like, they've been handcuffed because, they want to be up in front of the class and they want to be bringing learning to life, and they've been stuck sitting at a desk trying to teach that way or doing it virtually. And then I think as a head of school, I just said this to one of my employees the other day, 90% of my job is dealing with people's personalities. From the littlest person to the biggest person, and, from parents to teachers to staff and administrators, just dealing with personalities and helping all those personalities shine. And when they're not shining, helping them, figure out what's going on, and making sure we can get them to a place where they feel, good about what's going on, and helping them be as successful as they can possibly be.
Those are awesome responses. I got a couple questions about those. So I know you mentioned the teacher health and well-being. Do you guys require a different standard for having teachers come in that have to be, know the Quaker education? Because I know Montessori has that a little bit because it's obviously different. And
Yep.
Second part of that question is, are you guys also dealing with the struggle of teacher recruitment and retention? Like, I know it's a big one that keeps coming out from different teachers.
Absolutely. It's really interesting. Answer your question one, a lot of the teachers, when we post a job listing, we'll talk about being a Quaker education, Quaker program, and being grounded in the Friends testimonies of, the spices. And that's one of the things that we're looking for teachers to buy into. All the teachers who end up applying to us, when they read that, there seems to be a connective tissue of, when I saw that ad, it just spoke to me because that's how I've always wanted to teach. Particularly teachers who might be coming from public schools are like, oh my gosh, if I had the ability to focus on this stuff versus teaching to a standard, like we call them the SOL test here, or the standardized test for the state or whatever teacher that they, whatever state that they may be in that they're teaching to, what we're about is not necessarily not teaching to a test, but instilling a love of learning at an early age that will then foster that growth of a student no matter what level they're in. So teachers really kind of gravitate to those philosophies because it allows them to have freedom in their classroom to be the best teacher they can possibly be. The second part of that question was, remind me again? It was
teacher recruitment and retention.
So right now, one of our hardest issues is, again, small schools struggle with competing with competitive salaries for those larger independent schools that have a bigger endowment that can, create bigger salaries to get the best teachers. And public school as well. There's a lot of benefits to public schools that small independent schools don't necessarily have, even though we have a really good benefits package. Now, but yeah, again, I do think a lot of schools have been struggling with teacher retention and getting the best possible teachers. We're really fortunate, at the end of the day, because of who we are as a school and what we believe in and the mission that we are, putting out into the world. The teachers who come here are really gravitating to us being a friend school. And, surprisingly, I have a number of Montessori teachers that work for me, where they love Montessori, but they've seen this as another opportunity and be like, wow, I can expand my palette beyond just being a Montessori teacher and working in an independent school that still believes in, these, the grounding of a Montessori philosophy, but I can do all these other things in the class too.
And being a private school, you guys also, when new laws come into effect, like I know Virginia, like a whole bunch of stuff's been going on the last 6 months with schooling stuff. And that's been a hot topic for Virginia. Are you guys held by any of those same things, or you're kind of on your own to make all your own rules of what's taught, what's not taught?
Sure. No, yeah, we have to meet the same standards and the same, end result that public schools do. But I think we have more freedom on how we get to that end result. And, certainly as an independent school, our curriculum and, what we create is ours, but it has to meet those same state standards. But, we're also a religious-based school that has freedom within within that structure to be able to be a Quaker independent school and be the best Quaker school we can possibly be.
Okay. I love it. Wow. we get to the next part, which is the best part I love to talk about. This is where you get to brag about your school. So if you were, and you can be, it could be one thing, three things, whatever, but what's going really, really good for you guys that you're really proud of, that you'd like to brag about? And maybe, again, the goal is anybody who's listening is like, oh my gosh, I never thought about that. Or maybe we
Yeah.
can take a piece of that and bring it back to our school.
Absolutely. I think for us specifically, the one thing that's happened that's been magical here for the last 4 years, first and foremost, we've had a lot of enrollment success over the last 4 years, and I think a lot of independent schools have, partly because of COVID. That's part one, because when public schools were shutting down, independent schools were allowed to continue to thrive in their own unique individual ways, still meeting those protocols to keep kids safe. But we've been really fortunate to be able to continue to operate when other schools weren't, partly because of our size and our ability to be able to meet those standards. But then also, what parents have found in those experiences, like, wow, we never thought or considered, private school or independent school education for our kids, whether that's Waldorf, Montessori, Friends, regular independent school, Christian based, Catholic independent, whatever it might be. So we've been really fortunate to find success in that. I think second for us, it's been the alternative revenue streams that we've been able to create. And this is where I think a lot of schools, and you can be the small Montessori school and still do this, because I know my school back in New England and Rhode Island's been doing this. But, we've seen an explosion in our summer camps over the last 4 years. Each year getting exponentially bigger, and us offering more and more opportunities for kids. We've started a program here through, brilliant idea of my assistant head, Candace Jordan, called First Adventures of Friends. First Adventures is a parent and me program that we have for kids who haven't started school yet, so younger than 2.5 years old, where we invite parents to come in for, first cooking classes or circle classes for music, or child and parent yoga. And for us, that's one, it's a new revenue stream. Two, it's an enrollment starter for parents who might be looking at
Mhm.
schools but never thought about Friends. But wait a second, there's a parent and me program. I need something to do with my child during the day. Let's go check this out. And then they come and they fall in love with the school. And then creating after school opportunities for parents. That revenue stream for us has grown almost like 400% over the last
Wow.
4 years. Went from nothing to almost, 6-digit revenue stream, over the last 4 years. And for us as a small school, it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And I think that's one of the things, for a takeaway for the people who might be listening to this as a small school, really examining those revenue streams and how you can utilize your facility, small or big, to create some of those opportunities for parents, where you're creating community, in one breath, but you're also creating, extra dollars that weren't there beforehand.
Man, that I love, because like, and you literally just said it, but having something that, even if it didn't make money, it's still an awesome thing to do, because it's going to bring people to the school. They know about the school. They've never heard about it. Oh, tell me about what is Friends School like? But you're actually making money with it and putting the name of the school out there where they push enrollment. I mean, that's like a no brainer.
Yeah, and I would really, it's one of those things, really, especially for small schools, if you have the ability to do it and you have the space to be able to do it, and it can be something small. If you have a kitchen, doing the cooking and me classes, if you have a parent who likes that. We have a big experiential program as far as gardening. We like to get all our kids out on Fridays working in the gardens at different points in the year, and then those things that are in the gardens come back into the classroom. But that's part of our first adventures. We have a parent and me gardening class. We have a parent and me cooking class, a parent and me yoga class.
Mm.
So all those young parents who are looking for something to do to meet other young parents, whether they be moms or dads, at the same point where they are, don't necessarily aren't thinking about school yet, but are still looking for connections. They've come to Friends School, and then they've ended up staying and rolling, because then our next part of that is our cottage program, which starts at 2.5, which is that intro level to school, goes 2.5 to 3 years, 10 months. And it's a Montessori based program for parents who might be looking for 2 days of schooling a week, 3 days, or 5 days. And those parents from First Adventures roll right into the cottage program, and they never even knew about the school, from the very beginning.
So with these the programs that you have at the school during the summer that makes all that money, how do you get the word out right now, or how are people finding that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Partly now it's word of mouth. Right now, our summer camps, we open to our parents first. Our parents, are literally waiting at night before the link goes live to get in. And then when our parents, are done signing up, then we open it up to the parents outside the community. So the word of mouth that's associated with that now, because it's like, oh man, I got to get my kid in, I got to get my child in at friend's school for the summer camps. And if I don't do it right away, I know they're going to be filled out.
Mm.
Before that, it was, really strategic marketing. We have a really wonderful firm out of Rhode Island that helps us with our, Google AdWords and our Facebook campaigns, and using them in a strategic way that allows us to get in front of the eyeballs. Where this better than anybody being in marketing. Our website is really small, and the smaller your website is, the less it can be searched, and the more you have to work to get to the top of that search level, on the search bars through, that strategic, SMO marketing. And we've been able to do that really well in getting it, the right keyword searches. So when parents are looking for, small private schools in Hampton Roads or small private schools in Virginia Beach, we're popping up and getting them into looking at the school. So that's what it was early on, and we still do that. But now word of mouth has taken over across a number of our fronts, from enrollment to, the ancillary programs, to, even hiring and recruiting. That people hear there's a lot of really great things that are happening at Friends, and also into fundraising. Right now we're about to start a capital campaign, and the buzz around Virginia Beach Friends School is really strong right now because of all the great things that we've done. But it's been a 4-year process of building up to that and doing that, because a lot of times when you're in my position, if you're coming to a school that may be struggling, you have to look at the brand, you have to kind of look at where the positioning is of the school within the market, and then say, okay, like, what's the niche that we're going to fill? And, we've made some really strategic moves here over the last 4 years. When I came to the school, it was a pre-K through 12 school. And the high school was really struggling. At the end of my first year working with my board of directors, we made the strategic decision to phase out our high school over a 2-year period and really focus on being the best, 2.5 toddler to 8th grade school that we could be. That decision alone shifted our position in the market and let us focus on something totally different, and also woke parents up to go, wait a second, that's new and interesting, even for a school that's been around since 1955. Let me take a look at that. I hear there's things going on at Friends School. So, we went from 71 kids pre-K through 12 my first year here to 107 my second year, to 140 to 163 this year. And next year we'll be about 170, 175 or so. And and a lot of that is simply because of the shift that we decided, becoming the best, toddler through 8th grade program that would then feed into other high schools, versus trying to be something that the school was struggling to be as a pre-K through 12 school.
Man, and that's huge, Michael, to think about that, because it is the power of niching down and being so strategic and focused on one thing. It's obviously better for you guys as you figured out, but it's also better for the kids, because if they're not getting like what they really need, obviously, like, we're doing a disservice to the school, of course, to the kids and the family. So I know that was probably a scary decision to make, but obviously it was the right decision.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, for the school has gone through a number of ups and downs. But I think really looking at, for all schools, being able to look at how you sit in your marketplace. What does your brand say? What's your unique selling proposition, and how can you maximize that? And I think Friends really has done that nicely over the course of the last 4 years, of saying, okay, we know we can't compete at this level with these schools because we don't have those resources, but we do know we can be really competitive at the younger levels, because what we're offering is really special and really unique, and in a lot of ways one of a kind here in Hampton Roads. Let's really focus and dial down and be the best version of that we can be. And since we've done that, we've broken into whole other neighborhoods and marketplaces that we weren't before, and now those little areas keep growing exponentially because those parents are happy and they're talking to other parents. And then you build on top of that the other revenue streams that we've created. It's all now, knock on wood, working all in the same direction.
I got another two follow-up questions for you, because I think this is obviously what you're talking about right now is super valuable for any of the listeners for the fundraising side, the summer camp. So the two questions I have: summer camp, when you guys put that word out there, are you guys just setting up a page on your website that people go there, they pay $50, $100? I'd love to, if you could dive into even how much you're charging to give people ideas like, oh, how much would I charge for a gardening class? Is it one day, a whole summer, that type of side? And then the second part would be, what are some of the fundraising things you're doing through the year? Because I know some people, they get burned out. They go, oh, well, here's another fundraiser. But there's some good ones out there, and there's ways to do it the right way, I think, without burning out families. So I know those are probably two long questions, but I'd love to hear something from you.
Right. So I would encourage anybody to go. Our website is just vbfschool.org, and you could go into summer camps and you can kind of see the pricing. What we've done, and really this is one of those things where typically my assistant head and head of school, they really look at everything. They did a lot of market analysis on like what other camps are being offered, how much is that costing, and creating a price point that works well for what we're offering, but also in relationship to other camps that are happening. So really doing the market analysis of like, when you decide, we don't have drop-in fees. Drop-in fees, it's one price for the camp for that session. And then, you might do a 5-day camp and it's one price for that. Drop-in fees, in any situation where we have to deal a lot with ratios. And once those ratios are set, you can't have just kids just dropping in. So I'm listing a set fee that works for you based on what your market also dictates. And then there's also other fees on top of that. If the camp is something where we need the kids to bring X and Y and Z, there might be a couple other fees on top of that. But one of the things I think that has made our camps really successful is the fees have been really competitive based on other camps that are happening. The second part. Remind me again the second question.
What other fundraisers are you guys doing?
Oh yeah, the fundraising piece. So for us, we try to be really strategic about fundraising, and fundraising is tough because you don't want to get burnout from your community. Typically, this past year we try to do two major fundraisers in the course of the year: a fall fundraiser and a spring fundraiser. For us, the spring fundraiser, in the past, they've been fun runs. This year, the one that's been really successful, it was called Boo Fest this year. It was around Halloween. It was, it had to do with, it was more the idea of getting people out together. And, instead of trying, we've done things in the past where kids have done laps and, we've had getting sponsorships for the laps and things like that. Versus just a straight ask of saying, parents and community members, our goal is $30,000, and tapping into the grandparents and trying to reach that over the course of the week. And I think there's merit to be said for both. Either saying like, hey, community, we have a goal for this, and this is what that money's going to go to. Everybody in independent schools has their annual fund, and that annual fund is really important because it offsets those operational shortfalls. But Boo Fest and centering it around Halloween, the Halloween parade, and doing fundraising that was associated with that, just raffles and small things like that, we were really successful. We raised about $30,000. This coming fall, a lot of us have shied away from auctions and in-person auctions because we couldn't do that because of COVID. This year, we're still doing an online auction that's going to last a week, but then we have each year, it's called Founders Day. And again, Founders Day will have a goal associated with it, but it's an outdoor event with the balloon slide, festivities for parents, adult beverages, movies for the kids, and a number of activities. We've had some things, my first year we had what's called Slime Fest here, where the kids all raised money on a thermometer, and if they got the whole thing, they got the slime. The teachers, they made the slime, and that was kind of fun. But, I think there's a lot of amazing development officers out there, but I think sometimes that there's a dynamic tension between do we just ask our parents for what we need and try to raise it through the ask, or do we try to do those things like fundraisers and auctions and raffles? The only problem with the auctions and the raffles is a lot of times it's a really small number of parents that kind of make up the majority of those gifts, versus trying to do something that's more general and giving what you can give to get to a major platform. Whether it be grandparents and parents and aunts and uncles and things like that. But so there's no easy answer. Fundraising is just tough.
I know it's a different beast. And so I was like, I've had a couple people that had really good ideas on fundraising. I was like, oh, let me poke that one a little bit more for those that are interested.
I think ours, yeah, I do think, anytime we've had the kids, we just had a readathon for our kids, and as a matter of how many pages that you read, and the more pages you read, there was amounts associated with that the kids raised, and they raised about $3,500 to a readathon. That was just easy and didn't cost the school anything, and it was a great little small fundraiser. We do parent socials tonight, for example. There's a local brewery called Wasserhound that we have a parent social, or one of our first parent socials that we've had in 2 years. But they're donating 30% of their profits at the end of the night to the school. Cool. So, so it's cool, like things like that. Trying to build those partnerships with other organizations, I think, is really important from an independent school. Because those are the ones where, there might be a family there tonight that's never heard of Friend School and might be like, hey, wait a second, and this is something we might want to check out for the kids.
Sure. I love it. Well, I appreciate you diving into those a little bit more.
Absolutely.
This has been an awesome interview. We always wrap it up with one final question. I would love for you to share any tips, advice, strategy, anything final thing you'd like to share with any of the listeners, that if you maybe something you were like, oh, I wish I'd known this 30 years ago or something. It's whatever you want it to be. But how would you want to end the interview out, Michael?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. This is my first time doing a podcast, and I really appreciate the opportunity, getting to know you, and I think all educators, Mitchell, are just so grateful for what you're trying to do. I think it's awesome. So thank you so much. I think my biggest piece of advice, and I say this to parents all the time, it's always about fit. At the end of the day, when you're looking at schools, kick as many tires as you possibly can, and try to find the best fit to help make your child shine in ways that bring out their unique self. My parents, never had private school wasn't a thing where I grew up in Pennsylvania. Everybody just went to the local public school, and I went to school because I had to go to school and not because I wanted to go to school. And a lot of the reason I became an educator is because I wanted to create an environment where my kids just loved school and wanted to be at school every day. But part of that was because we found the exact right fit that worked for them and also for me professionally. And I think it's just, when you find the right fit for your child, whether it's Montessori, whether it's Quaker independent, whether it's Catholic independent, Christian school, straight up independent school, Waldorf, you name it. When the fit is right, the sky is the limit. And if the fit's not right, that's where you need to have the family powwow, sit back and say, something's not working here. Do we have the means and the resources to be able to set our child up to really love learning? And I say this to parents all the time, particularly when they come start to look at the very bottom level. We're also trained to save money for college. But what happens is, if you don't put the money or the investment in the front end, when the kids get to college, and if they don't like learning, you're kind of wasting your money and they're just going through the motions. But if you put the investment in their that pre-K through 8th grade environment, and they just love school, high school will take care of itself. And, because they're just going to love studying, they're going to love being a student, and they're going to love the value of learning. And I see that with my own 2 kids. My daughter, we've been fortunate to send her to an independent school, but we don't have to talk to her about her academics because she's just really invested in her academics because of the experiences she got at her Montessori school and the years she got here. And the same with my son. My son's a completely different person, but it's the same thing. He values, getting good grades, and he values his education, but he also, has the sports element and things like that. But if we went to put that investment in on the early end, I don't know if they would feel the same way if they were just going through the motions of in a school where it was more about taking the test versus, the love of learning and creating that passion for learning. But the fit, at the end of the day, the fit was just right. The fit was right for my kids. The fit was right for their dad professionally and personally. And then the skies become the limit. And I see that all the time. When the fit is right, man, the sky is the limit. But if the fit's not right, that's when you have to have that conversation and say, okay, there must be a better fit out there. And sometimes, we have to have conversations with our parents here. Like, we don't necessarily your child's great, but this fit might not be the right work, the right space for them. And that's okay, because there's a better fit out there for them. So that's the biggest piece of advice for anybody. Just, when the fit is right, whether it's personally, professionally, educationally, or whatever, man, kids will just shine. And it's okay to reevaluate if the fit necessarily isn't right. There's nothing wrong with that. But kicking as many tires as possible to find the right fit.
So true, so good. And it even applies to, I know this is a school podcast, but like I say the same thing about people when they talk about churches is like, I don't like that church. I'm like, there's so many out there. There's a church for everybody because you might not like how like the pastor does this or they do this. That's fine. Like go like find one that works for you and your family. Or there's something out there for, and that argument again, separate thing, but
Oh
maybe
no, absolutely. It's fascinating. In the course of my career, I worked at public schools, two Catholic all boys independent schools, and all single sex education is amazing. Um, I've worked at now two Quaker independent schools, a Montessori school, and I've had a lot of different experiences working with other schools. And from every one of those schools and programs and all those different philosophies, I've taken them all into how I operate as an educator. But each one of those experiences has been unique and gratifying, and there's been ups and downs. But there's value to take from all those experiences, and all those different fits and experiences have made I think me a better educator. But it also makes us all kind of look at things in the world very much like from a holistic perspective. And you're right, whether it's your faith and exploring different church options, whether it's school, whether it's your job, at the end of the day, it's all about the fit.
yeah, it sounds like I think Michael should have a third kid, everybody, and do the complete opposite with that one and see if they love education at the end so we can really prove this philosophy out. What do you think, Michael?
Absolutely. The funny thing about it, my daughter's now a junior, my son's a freshman in high school, and there was a time there my wife and I considered a third kid, but we ended up getting a second dog instead. And so we that boat has sailed, but I'll certainly continue to make that statement with all my parents to make sure that they hear it.
I love it. Well, Michael, it's been truly an honor and a privilege, and I wish you and the Virginia School obviously nothing but the best, and you and your family nothing but the best. And please continue to do what you're doing. You're doing awesome.
And again, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been such a pleasure, and again, thanks to you for all you're doing for education just in general.
Well, another huge shout out and a thank you to Michael for being on the podcast today. I had a blast talking to him, and I actually talked for like an hour and a half in total, but the podcast recording was, of course, just between that 30 to 40 minutes. He's an amazing guy doing amazing things, and I wish him and his school absolutely nothing but the best. And as always, I hope you guys were able to take at least one thing from today's episode, at least one. There could be at least two or three, but at least one that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. Maybe it was around the world of fundraising. We talked about some fundraising ideas that they're doing, or the different revenue generating ideas for summer camps. I love that idea, and that's something I would love to see more schools doing. Even if it didn't bring in more revenue for your school, just being around the community and connecting more families and parents together, there's nothing wrong about that. I love that idea, so I'm hoping you guys can take that one, take it back to your school, implement it, connect with more families in the community. I absolutely love that idea. If you're looking for more ideas or ways to grow your enrollment, connect better with your families using digital marketing in your website, maybe you're like, my website, it's not the greatest. It hasn't been redone in 5-10 years. My goodness. I would love to hear from you. We'd love to help you guys get on the right track and grow enrollment, get an awesome state-of-the-art website to connect better with your families in the area. You can find out more about what we have to offer, what we can do for you at schoolsuccessmakers.com. That's schoolsuccessmakers.com. We'd love to hear from you. We'll be here next week with another awesome guest as usual on the School Success Podcast. We'll see you then.